She thought she had encountered a prophet, one sent by God to bring healing, hope, and direction. But behind the robes and the scriptures was a master manipulator, armed not just with words, but with charms, psychological control, and an unquenchable thirst for money. He promised altars. He promised divine blessings. He even claimed her money would help broadcast the gospel. But every seed sown only fed the greed of a wolf in sheep's clothing. This is not just another story about deception in the church. This is a confession from a woman who survived spiritual manipulation, emotional abuse, and financial exploitation, all in the name of God. But what the prophet didn't see coming was God's mercy, because just when she was at her lowest, trapped under his spell, God broke the chain and pulled her out. This is her story, one of betrayal, bondage, and redemption, a warning to all, a wake-up call to the innocent. This is a confession you must hear.
I was in a place in my life where I desperately needed direction. I needed God. I wasn't looking for fame or miracles. Just clarity and peace. That's when I came across this man, this prophet. He spoke with such authority. Quoted scriptures with ease. Carried himself like he had just walked out of the throne room of heaven. I didn't know then that I had just walked into a trap. It started with small things. A prayer. A word of knowledge. A prophetic instruction. Before I knew it, I was not just following him, I was financing him. Sending money for things I believed were sacred. An altar. A media broadcast. Seeds for God's work. But all I was really doing was feeding a predator disguised as a preacher. He used charms. He used manipulation. He used the very name of God to control me, to rob me, and to keep me bound. But God, in His mercy, rescued me. He pulled me out. And now I know better. What I am going to share with you is a warning to anyone who is blindly following a man, thinking he's speaking for God. Not everyone in a pulpit is sent from heaven. Some are demons in disguise, and I met one. It was early 2022. I had just come out of a very confusing season in my life, family battles, sleepless nights, and spiritual attacks I couldn't explain. I was praying more. Fasting. Searching for answers. I needed someone who could hear from God. Someone anointed, someone true. That's when I first came across him. A friend had shared a clip of one of his online sermons. He sounded so convincing, so powerful. He would speak with this strange certainty. The truth is that it felt real. Too real to be fake. I remember telling myself, this man must truly be a prophet. A few weeks later, I attended one of his online Zoom services. It felt so personal. During the session, he called my name. My full name. And he began to speak things about my life that no one knew. I was shocked. I cried. I believed. I truly believed I had finally found a man of God. Not long after, I was invited to a one-on-one session with him. It was intense. He prayed over me, spoke in tongues. He told me I was under a generational curse, that if I didn't act fast, things would get worse. He made it sound like God was urgently calling me to sow a seed, to build an altar, to redeem my family line. And because I feared God, I obeyed him. That was the beginning. What I didn't know was that this wasn't ministry. It was manipulation. Behind the prayers were hidden intentions. Behind the prophecies were tactics. And what looked like divine revelation was actually spiritual entrapment. The first money I sent was for what he called a family altar, an altar he claimed would be installed inside the pulpit of his church. He said it would stand as a memorial for my bloodline, and that every time he stood to preach, that altar would cry out for my family. He even gave me the account details and followed up until I transferred the funds. I didn't hesitate. I felt I was doing something powerful. Something spiritual. Something holy. I didn't know I was funding a lie. Looking back now, I realize how deeply spiritual manipulation can run. It doesn't come like evil. It comes dressed in scriptures, coated with charisma, and wrapped in a robe. You don't realize you're being used until you're empty, emotionally, financially, and spiritually. After the family altar was paid for, I expected a testimony. A change. At least a picture of the altar being installed, something. But there was nothing. Just silence. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I thought, maybe God was working behind the scenes. Maybe I wasn't spiritual enough to see it yet. That's the thing about manipulation, it makes you blame yourself. Then fast forward in October 2023, just after he returned from his London program, he reached out to me again. This time, the tone was different. Urgent, desperate. He said the Lord had placed it on his heart to air his recent program on YouTube, but he didn't have the funds. He claimed the platform required special payment and clearance, something about spiritual warfare on the digital airwaves. He told me if the message wasn't broadcasted immediately, the divine timing would be missed and souls would be lost. He said I had a role in this harvest. He even added a subtle warning that if I delayed, my blessing would also be delayed. And if I withheld, I would be standing in the way of God's work. I was torn. Deep down, something didn't feel right. But I didn't want to disobey God. I didn't want to be cursed. So once again, I transferred money. A large sum. And I kept telling myself, you're doing this for God. But now I know better. I was financing a fraud. That request wasn't the last. There were more. Constant messages. Voice notes. Sudden revelations about witches fighting my progress, evil altars rising against my marriage, enemies in my family. Every single revelation came with a demand. Sow this seed. Redeem this curse. Cover your son with a sacrifice. It became endless. Like I had become his personal ATM. A spiritual hostage. And every time I tried to pause or question, he would come back with a prophecy laced with fear. Don't delay, daughter. Time is not on your side. Or worse. I see death in the family if this altar is not settled quickly. I was giving out of fear. Out of guilt. Out of spiritual pressure. Not love. Not faith. Just fear. And let me tell you something, anything built on fear is not of God. Looking back, the signs were there. The constant pressure. The secrecy. The lack of accountability. But I was too spiritually starved and emotionally vulnerable to see it. That's how these false prophets operate, they don't just scam your bank account. They steal your discernment, too. Because of that, I don't even know when it started, but one day I just stopped praying. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say anymore. I had given everything, my money, my trust, my heart. And yet, the peace I was promised never came. The breakthrough never showed up. The prophetic words began to feel empty. I was tired. Not just physically, but spiritually drained. I would wake up feeling guilty, sleep with anxiety. I lived under a cloud of constant fear. What haven't I sown for? What if the curse hasn't fully broken? What if God is angry with me for hesitating? I was going broke. I was losing myself. I even started having health issues, chest pains, fatigue, insomnia. I was pouring out from an empty cup, and there was no one to see it. Not even him. He had moved on to his next crusade. His next campaign. His next victim. I started to feel invisible. Forgotten. By man, and even by God. There were moments, dark, quiet moments, where I would sit in my room, stare at the ceiling, and whisper, Lord, did I do something wrong? Why are you silent? Why does it feel like I'm fighting battles you told me I already won? I had no answers. No confirmation. No evidence that anything I'd been promised was real. The altar he claimed was raised in my name. I never saw it. The YouTube broadcast he said my seed would support. It never aired. The spiritual covering he claimed to give me. I felt more attacked than ever. The truth hit me like a slow leak in a roof. It didn't come all at once. It dripped, little by little. A friend would mention something strange about him. A story would pop up about his past. My spirit would feel uneasy during his online prayers. And finally, I started asking myself the hardest question of all. Was this really God, or was I just spiritually manipulated by a man with no conscience? That question broke something in me. And once it broke, the fog started to clear. You see, I didn't leave him immediately. That's the truth. It wasn't a bold exit or some dramatic confrontation. It was slow, like waking up from a bad dream you didn't realize you were having. I stopped responding to his messages as quickly. I stopped sending money. I began to test every prophecy, every revelation he sent me. And the more I did, the more I saw it. Nothing he said was truly rooted in God. It was rooted in fear, control, and profit. One day, I asked him for proof of the altar. I said, "Can I see it? Can you show me what was built in my name?" His response was cold, dismissive. He said, "You don't need to see it to believe. Faith doesn't need evidence." And that's when I knew this wasn't about God anymore. It never was. I started to speak to others. Quietly. Carefully. And to my surprise, I wasn't alone. Other women who were always on the live Zoom programs. Other givers. Other victims who had sent money, sown seeds, made sacrifices, all of them waiting for blessings that never came. He had many of us under his spell. Each of us thinking we were chosen, special, called to a divine purpose. But in truth, we were prey. That realization was painful. Embarrassing. But it was also freeing. But I always say that this made me realize how important I needed God for myself. And not because a pastor said this or that. I started praying again. But not like before, not through his words, not through his decrees. I prayed raw, simple prayers. Just me and God. No middleman. No prophet. Just me, crying, repenting, healing. And God, in his mercy, didn't shame me. He didn't turn me away. He began to rebuild me, one piece at a time. My discernment. My strength. My faith. Living wasn't just about walking away from a man. It was about walking away from spiritual abuse. From fear-based faith. From religious slavery. It was about finding God again, on my own terms. Before I go, let me say that it wasn't until I sat down and went through my transfer records that the reality fully hit me. Line after line. Amount after amount. Seeds for altars. Seeds for deliverance. Seeds for YouTube. Seeds to silence curses. Seeds to break covenants. I had emptied my account in the name of faith. I didn't just lose money. I lost trust. I lost my sense of safety in spiritual spaces. I lost time, months of fasting, praying, and crying over promises that were never rooted in God to begin with. Emotionally, I was a wreck. I didn't know how to tell my family what I had done. I didn't know how to forgive myself. I felt like a fool. How could I have been so blind? How could someone stand in God's name and lie so confidently? But the worst damage wasn't in my wallet or in my pride. It was in my spirit. I had allowed a man to stand between me and God. I let him define what God was saying to me. I stopped trusting the Holy Spirit inside me because I was too busy chasing the voice of someone who claimed to be closer to heaven than I was. That's the real abuse, not just financial theft, but spiritual invasion. He didn't just scam me out of money. He scammed me out of my intimacy with God. I now see how close I came to total ruin. If God hadn't intervened, if He hadn't allowed the scales to fall from my eyes, I don't know where I'd be today. I was headed for a spiritual death, all while thinking I was serving Him. I know now that God never needed me to buy altars. He never required me to pay for prophetic access. The veil was torn. I already had access to Him. What I lacked wasn't a prophet, it was confidence in the relationship I already had with my Father. I allowed myself to be spiritually abused. And yes, I take responsibility for my blindness. But I also know this: God is a healer. And while men may lie in His name, He Himself never failed me.
Brothers and sisters, if you're listening to me right now, please hear this. Not every man who calls himself a prophet is sent by God. Some are sent by greed. Some are sent by their own ego. And some are sent by power so dark, even they don't fully understand what they've submitted themselves to. Don't be fooled by tongues, by long titles, by supernatural performances on the altar. These men, these wolves in robes, know how to package deception and present it as divine instruction. They know how to read your desperation and turn it into a transaction. Today, I speak to you not as host, but as a brother who has survived spiritual abuse. I speak because someone out there, just like I was, is about to send their last savings to a man who's lying in God's name. I told you in one of our episodes that I have been a victim, and when I broke free, I decided to start this family. Because someone out there is on the edge of losing their peace, their mind, their marriage, because of manipulative, prophetic instructions. I do not just share these messages with you. I am raising an alarm. That is why I do not attach names to the confessions when they come. I only want you to take the substance of the message and walk with it. So that, anywhere you stand, you can know the truth from the lie. You see, when a prophet starts demanding money to pray for you, to redeem you, or to protect your family, pause. When every prophecy requires a seed, and every seed must be urgent, pause. God is not a slot machine. And faith is not for sale. Right now, there are people in churches who are under demonic control, thinking it's the Holy Spirit. People being scammed through emotional manipulation, spiritual threats, and false revelations. Let me tell you something, I still believe in the prophetic. And the truth is that, you can beautifully be your own prophet if you allow yourself. I still believe God speaks through people. But I also know the devil wears collars, carries Bibles, and preaches from pulpits. I've seen it. I lived it. And I escaped it. So please, test every spirit. Protect your mind. Guard your finances. And most importantly, never hand over your relationship with God to any man, no matter how anointed he claims to be. The beauty of this is that, you can heal. You can break free. And yes, you can still hear God for yourself. Join us on our Telegram channel this month, when we start our prayer sections. Information will be provided going forward. Peace, and we shall meet again.